Okay, so good morning, everyone. I know it's a Sunday and I know it's supposed to be like a rest day, but we're lacking behind syllabus a little bit and we haven't even done like Friday's class. Because of some issues, I couldn't take a Friday class, so we have postponed that to today. So please bear with me for an hour. Just don't consider it as some kind of burden or something, but let's just go through this very quickly, right? So good morning and hello everyone who just joined right now. Hi Aman. Hello Yash. Good morning everyone. So in the meanwhile a couple of other people, let them join, but we'll do our introductions till then, right? So as most of y'all know, my name is Nikitha and I'm the history educator here at Unacademy Scholars channel. I am taking classes for standard 11th and 12th, right? And a little bit about me regarding my educational qualifications. I have very recently graduated from Ashoka University with a bachelor's degree in history and a minor in political science, right? So that is about me. Yes, so hello everyone. Hi Disha. Also just letting y'all before and letting y'all know before in hand that by today, like by the end of this session, we will be completing chapter 4. That's like officially finishing the first part of your 12th class textbooks, right? And the fact that we are finishing this chapter today means that Monday we'll be having a quiz on this chapter, right? Like a mentee quiz. So if anyone wants to prepare, you have a whole day to yourself. So yeah, you can just go through the slides or go through the textbook, whatever, and then prepare for mentee quiz for tomorrow, which is scheduled at 6 p.m. Right? Yeah. So without any further ado, we'll dive deep. Just give me a second, guys. Yeah, so but before that, if any of y'all don't know the anything about the Telegram Scholars channel and would want to join the channel, the link is in the description below. You can go and click on that and join the channel. So basically the advantage here is you will be given updates or information about what is going to happen at what time on this scholars channel, right? Like any special classes or like the change in timetables and all that stuff, you will be informed on the telegram group, right? So y'all can join it and the link is in the description below. Please check out. But let's just quickly go through some of the Unacademy Plus benefits. So you can actually sit at your own homes and listen to some of the live classes taught by top educators of India, and all of them are available on one platform, right? And there are also regular doubt solving sessions, regular answer writing sessions. Along with that, you can also take part in live test series and also practice tests, right? And every educator here at Unacademy Plus, they make sure that they are covering the syllabus in an exhaustive manner, which basically means you don't have to worry about missing out on a particular topic, right? Which is a part of your syllabus, as mentioned by the central CBSE board. You don't have to worry about that. And there's also mentorship given to you. There's also guidance given to you, along with the access to study materials in the form of PDFs, which you can later refer to for any queries or doubts. And the subscription is as follows. As you can see on the screen, there is a little bit change to the subscriptions here in terms of the time periods. Instead of 5, we have 6 varieties of subscriptions right now. So additionally, we have new features like 3 months and 9 months. And the remaining are the same. It's a 12-month, 15-month, 18 and 24-month subscription. The prices are clearly visible on the screen. You can have a look at them and subscribe to whichever one you want. But the hack here is that the longer period of time you actually take a subscription for, the more beneficial it's going to be for you, because you're going to save yourself a couple of bucks by the end of the day by subscribing for a longer period, right? And not just that, Unacademy also has iconic subscriptions. Here the features are even better, as in you will get one-on-one mentorship, like a personal mentor will be allotted to you. Along with that, there are live doubt solving sessions and also weekly reports and study planners provided to you. And another advantage here is there's a direct parent connect. So your parent can come in direct contact with your personal mentor and basically know about where you stand in terms of your academics, right? So that will be like a huge advantage. And the subscriptions for Iconic are like the time periods are similar to the Plus, as in there are 6 ranges: 3 months, 9 months, 12, 15, 18 and 24. The prices are up on the screen. Have a look at them and go forward with whichever one you want, right? So that was the pitch. I see a couple of other people joining. Hi Darshita. Good morning. Yes, so I think we can start without any further ado, right? So the last class we were talking about, the last slide we talked about was paintings, right? Like how they experience the ravages of time and do not, like they are not permanent when compared to the stone sculptures, right? So that is where we ended last class. I think it was like a Wednesday class, right? So now we'll be stepping into the next sub theme of your textbook, which is like the 10th sub theme, named as new religious traditions, right? So we've just been talking about like Buddhism and Jainism throughout the chapter, like very particularly, but now we'll also come across other different religious traditions, like the split in Buddhism itself into Mahayana and Hinayana. And in the next couple of slides we'll also be talking about Vaishnavism and Shaivism a little bit. So yeah, we'll start. How did the Mahayana Buddhism develop, right? So firstly, to tell you what Mahayana Buddhism is, if you all remember, we talked about the schism in Jainism, right? The split in Jainism, how Shvetambaras and Digambaras came into being, how one sect chose to be naked without dressing and the other sect dressed in white colors, right? In the same manner, Buddhism also at some point of time experience a split in the religion, right? Like ideas and beliefs started changing. So this split eventually led to two groups, and those two groups are called as Mahayana Buddhists and Hinayana Buddhists, right? So Mahayana spelling is right here. I'll just write Hinayana spelling for your reference. Right, so that is Hinayana, right? We'll talk about what they believe in, what are their ideals in the next couple of slides. But for now, just remember that the time when the split happened was roughly around 1st century CE, right? During the age of Kanishka, or like the peak of Kushana kingdom. That is exactly when the Buddhism split into two, right? And there's a clear evidence in the way or the ideas or beliefs or practices these two sects follow, right? So what are the differences also we'll see in the next slides, right? And what is the difference, right? So the early Buddhist teachings, basically referred to as Hinayana Buddhists, they gave a lot of importance to self effort in achieving what? In achieving Nibbana, or basically Nirvana. Nibbana is just another word for Nirvana, guys. Don't get confused, right? So, in order to attain that stage, or in order to attain moksha, there was a lot of importance given to the self, like the self individual, with your own efforts, with your own understanding, with your own knowledge. Only if you as a self are present in the scenario, then it is possible to attain nirvana or moksha, right? That is what Hinayana Buddhists believed. And apart from that, they just saw Buddha to be a human figure. I think we've also dealt with this concept a couple of classes earlier, where we were talking about the what do you say, the Buddha as a figure, right? What is this figure? Is he a divine figure? Is he a god? Is he a human? or like a representative of God. Like what is his position on earth, right? So according to Hinayana Buddhists, Buddha was just a human figure, right? And what did he do to attain enlightenment? He basically meditated, right? Like he sat under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya and he meditated, and eventually he attained enlightenment, right? So guys, don't get confused between enlightenment and nirvana, because enlightenment is just like the basic stage where you have all this knowledge and you will have that realization within yourself, right? But the fact that you're achieving nirvana is something else. It's like the final stage or the final aim if you're a Buddhist. As in, you lose connection with the outside world, you lose the importance of self, right? You're not attached to the cycle of rebirth or karma. You have basically gained victory over all these worldly materials. That state is called nirvana. But enlightenment is just like the basic thing where you have the knowledge about what's going on in the world, right? So that's the difference between nirvana and enlightenment. So Buddha, first he was enlightened and eventually he attained nirvana. But how did he do it? He did it all with his own effort. Like he put in the effort. Nobody helped him. It was only because of him that he was enlightened, right? So that is what Hinayana Buddhists to believe in. So what are the 3 points to remember here? Hinayana Buddhists believe that Buddha was a human. And also he attained nirvana by because of his own efforts, right? So this idea started slowly changing during the 1st century CE, and this is where the concept or the idea of savior emerged, right? So what were people believing now? People thought, or basically whom we term as Mahayana Buddhists, they thought that somebody else will come and help you to attain enlightenment, right? So it is not because of self, it is not because of your own efforts, but somebody else, like a third person, will be your savior. And those saviors in the later days are called as bodhisattvas, right? So these bodhisattvas will come and teach you, give you knowledge, impart you the skills whichever you need, and they will do some mantras or something, and that is how you will be attained, and that is how you will achieve salvation. That is what Mahayana Buddhists believe. So the point here is the concept of self effort or the importance of self effort is lost, right? And yeah, so that was like the basic difference. And also Mahayana Buddhists started believing that Buddha is a divine figure, Buddha is a god and not just a human. And they also believed in the physical form of Buddha, right? In the early Buddhist traditions, if we have seen, we have never come across statues of Buddha, let's say. Like there's no physical form given to him. They only believed in the ideals and teachings of Buddha, right? But when it comes to Mahayana Buddhism, people actually started giving Buddha a shape. Statues were being erected in different temples and stupas, right? So I hope like there are 3 basic differences, and I hope people understood what those differences are, right? Any clarifications needed till here, please put them down in the chat box, guys. Yeah. So if no questions, we can continue forward, right? Yeah. Again, a little bit detailed explanation as to who bodhisattvas were, right? So bodhisattvas, as I was telling you, were these compassionate beings. Like obviously, in order for them to impart knowledge to somebody else, they themselves need to be enlightened first, right? So first they went through that process, they enlightened themselves. And what is expected of an enlightened person? Like generally, Buddhists thought, according to the early Buddhist traditions, that once you attain enlightenment, you have to further improve yourself and attain nirvana, which is the last stage, which is moksha. and completely abandon yourself from the world. Like, don't be in touch with normal humans, right? Involve in your own thing. You keep meditating. You start teaching good to the people, right? Abandon yourself from the worldly pleasures. But that is not what bodhisattvas did. They stopped themselves after they attained enlightenment. They did not achieve nirvana, point to be noted. Instead, they went around telling people how they can attain enlightenment, right? So, that is not what the actual Buddhism preaches us. But bodhisattvas were kind of going against the early Buddhist traditions, right? And as I was telling you, the image form of worship was becoming popular in the Mahayana Buddhism, right? Not just of Buddhas, but also Bodhisattvas were considered to be godly figures, and their figures were also established in the stupas and all, and they were worshipped. Like, image kind of worship was very much prevalent and an integral part of Mahayana Buddhism, right? So, as you can see here, it's a figure of the Buddha from the early 1st century CE. Till then, we never knew what Buddha looked like, right? Except the people who saw him in real life. Other than that, we don't know what Buddha looked like. But in this 1st century CE, Mahayana Buddhists came up with their own version of what Buddha looked like when he was alive. And they kind of gave him a godly appearance, a divine appearance, right? As you can, like, if you zoom into the picture, or if you like Google Buddha pictures, you can clearly see like ornament, like this is one ornament or like a necklace type which he adorns himself. And there's also like headdresses. Like, if you look at this headdress very clearly, it appears as if it's grand and rich, right? So if you look at all these things, they are giving Buddha a godly, divine status, right? But that is not how Buddha was in real life. He never put on all these headdresses, or like he never had all these ornaments around his hands and necks, right? Yeah, we can go forward. So, this new way of thinking, which was coming up in the 1st century CE, basically referred to as Mahayana Buddhism, right? So, Mahayana was a Sanskrit term, and in literal sense, it meant that it was a great vehicle. As in, Mahayana Buddhists started associating themselves with something great, like something superior, right? When compared to the other Buddhists who were called as Hinayanas, which literally translated to a lesser vehicle. Like, they're looking down, like Mahayana Buddhists are looking down upon Hinayana Buddhist people, right? Yeah, so that is what Mahayana Buddhists liked to refer to themselves as. But if you look from the Hinayana Buddhist point of view, they preferred to call themselves as Theravadas instead of Hinayana Buddhists, and there's a reason behind it. Because there is a particular word called Thera. Like, Theras are basically these people who were disciples of Buddha, or like who taught people or spread the message of Buddha, right? Like, they were called as Theras. So, in order to respect them, uh, so-called Hinayana Buddhists wanted to name themselves as Theravadins instead of Hinayana Buddhists, right? This basically meant that they are respecting the old path of Buddhism, or like they are respecting the teachers or the disciples of Buddha, right? Okay, so any questions till here? This is a very important concept, guys. As far as your board examinations are concerned, definitely there'll be a question regarding Mahayana and Hinayana Buddhism. So please make sure if you're understood or not, and just ask me any doubts you have. I'm very happy to explain it again, right? Okay, so Vedant has a question. Vedant, I did my bachelor's from Ashoka University, which is in Sonipat, Haryana, but like pretty close to Delhi, right? Yeah. Okay, so Yash says clear, ma'am. Cool. I'm hoping everybody else understood as well. Yeah, so now we'll deviate a little bit and like deviate a little bit from Buddhism itself and talk about the growth of Puranic Hinduism, right? So we're dealing into the sect of Hinduism. Guys, just a point to be noted here. In the last couple of chapters, like even till chapter 3, we were talking about Brahmanical traditions. But I have never referred to Brahmanical traditions as Hinduism because that was not the actual form of Hinduism we practice today, right? The modern form of Hinduism emerged very lately, like in the very recent times, right? So never call the Harappa religion or the Brahmanical religion or like the early Vedic religions as Hinduism. That is not Hinduism. Okay, so don't get confused. Yeah, so we'll be talking about Puranic Hinduism, right? So this notion of savior, as we were talking when it came to Mahayana Buddhists, it was not just unique to Buddhism, but this notion of savior itself was being developed in different ways, right? In different traditions, right? And we clearly see them when it comes to Puranic Hinduism, especially in sects like Vaishnavism and Shaivism. So, just in one liners, I will tell you who Shaivas and Vaishnavas are, right? So, Vaishnavism is basically a subsect of Puranic Hinduism where people were interested in following a deity called Vishnu, right? So, again, according to Puranic Hinduism, there are three major gods, right? The first one is Brahma, the second one is Vishnu, and the third one is Shiva, right? So, people who ever wanted to follow this particular deity Vishnu, they were referred to as Vaishnavists, or the religion was called as Vaishnavism, right? And people who ever wanted to follow Shiva or who believed in Shiva to be the supreme deity, they were called as Shaivists, and their sect was called as Shaivism, right? So within Shaivism and within Vaishnavism, you see this notion of savior, right? So basically for them, Vishnu and Shiva were the mediators, or let's say the means or saviors for them to attain moksha or salvation, right? And the kind of relationship that a devotee and a god had, let's say I believe in Vaishnavism, right? For example, the kind of relation I and Lord Vishnu had is that of a bhakti relation, right? Like I completely believe in Vishnu, I'm a bhakti to him, right? So I'm considered a bhakti, I'm considered a devotee and all that stuff. So there was a kind of love and devotion or bhakti kind of relationship between me and Vishnu or Shiva, let's say for that matter. So I hope this point is clear. Yeah. So we'll quickly move on, right? So we'll be talking about Vaishnavism in a little bit detail, right? So in Vaishnavism, Vishnu in particular, as most of us know, if any of us are familiar about the Hindu traditions, we know that Vishnu had avatars, or in English, they are called as incarnations, right? So Vishnu had these 10 avatars attached to them, right? Like Matsya avatar, even Krishna, I think Rama and Krishna were also considered to be those avatars of Vishnu, right? And interestingly, this is not a part of your textbook, but just one fun fact: Vaishnavism, in the 10 avatars, they considered Buddhism or the form of Buddha to be the eighth avatar, right? So what you're seeing here, Vaishnavists are trying to lure Buddhists into the Hindu tradition. They wanted Buddhism to be a part of Hinduism, and that is why they themselves claimed that Buddha or Buddhism is considered to be the eighth figure or like eighth incarnation of the Vishnu, right? Of Lord Vishnu. This is really interesting, guys. There's a lot of politics behind it. There's a lot of work also written by a lot of historians and scholars. If anybody is interested, please go through it. Go through it. It's a really interesting concept, right? So, for just remember that he was considered the eighth avatar of Vishnu, right? So, why did he have to take up all these avatars is the question. Why can't he just be the way he is? Why can't he just be the Vishnu, the Lord, right? The reason for him taking up all these avatars is that whenever world was in a state of chaos, or whenever the world was dominated by evil forces, like everything was going on in bad terms, like everything was evil, people were not maintaining their ethical standards or moral standards, that is when Vishnu took these forms, right? And he came onto the earth to protect these people, to protect the world from evil forces, right? In order to save the world, he took up these avatars. That is what the Puranic tradition claims. We really don't know what the truth is, but according to the traditions, that is the story or that is the narration, right? And it is highly popular that all these avatars might not be too famous in all the parts of India. uh, each avatar may be popular only in different parts of the country, right? Let's say, for example, the avatar of Krishna. He was very specifically famous in the region of Mathura, the present day Uttar Pradesh, right? He might not be that famous in Tamil Nadu or Assam, let's say. He had that due importance given to him. He had that significance only in Mathura, right? So, in the same manner, other avatars had importance in different parts of the country, right? So, but why were they doing all this? Another reason as to why they are incorporating local deities, for example, let's say Buddha, to be a part of Vaishnavite religion, right? If we ever think about it, we will obviously have this question in our mind: why are they doing it, right? Why are they trying to incorporate local deities into the religion of Vaishnavism, right? So the answer to this is, back in those times, whoever are ahead, like whoever are dominating the Vaishnavist tradition, let's say the Brahmanas or whoever, they wanted to form a unified religious tradition, right? They wanted to bring all the people within the Indian subcontinent under the umbrella of one major religion, one unified religion. And that is why they're putting in a lot of effort to incorporate all these local traditions into Vaishnavism, right? So I hope that point is clear as well. Yes, you're absolutely right. The avatars range from Rama, Krishna, Matsya, and Kalki avatar also, right? You're right, Yash. Yeah, so I hope everything is clear till here, guys. Any questions, please don't hesitate to ask in the chat box. Yeah, we will move ahead. Yeah, so these forms, which we are talking about, the 10 avatars of Vishnu, right? So they were often represented in sculptures. That is why we have a lot of temples, right? Like whichever part of the Indian subcontinent you go to, whichever village, whichever city, you will definitely come across all these sculptures of the various forms, not just of Buddhism, but also like Shaivism, so not just of Vaishnavism, but also of Shaivism, right? Like you find all these lingas. Like I'm hoping everybody knows what lingas are, right? Like if you go to any Shiva temple, it's very rare that you will encounter the face or the human form of Shiva, but instead there is a linga in the Shiva temple and people worship this linga. It is considered to be one of the symbol or like the sacred symbol for Shaivists, right? So whichever part of India go to, you will definitely come across all these sculptures. Like there are Rama sculptures, there are Krishna sculptures, there are like I'm not sure what that avatar is called, but like half human and half lion, right? So you find all these images in the form of sculptures in various temples in different parts of the Indian subcontinent even today, right? So yeah, and all such representations, basically all these sculptures, they depicted a complex set of ideas about the deities and their attributes through symbols, right? So not just Shiva, who has a symbol which is Linga, but if you look at other goddesses as well, I'm not sure about the associations, but there are certain symbols, right? Like for example, headdresses, or uh, is it some form of Lakshmi who has lotus as her prominent symbol, right? And if you come to like Gaja Lakshmi, elephant is her symbol. And there are other auspicious objects as well. There's a trishul in the hands of one deity, right? So all these symbols, they have a lot of significance, and they basically portray that these are set of complex ideas within the religious traditions, right? So that is what these symbols portray. And how do people understand these sculptures, right? If you see a human form, you'll you'll come to a conclusion that okay, fine, this might be Buddha, or this might be Shiva, or this might be Vishnu. But instead of the human form, if you come across these symbols like Trishul or Lotus, or um, whatever, like whatever symbol it is, how will you know that what is the significance of it? To which deity is this associated? Right? So that is when historians went through all these stories from Puranas. Right? So Puranas were basically these texts, the ancient texts comprised by Brahmanas, and they were almost finished. They were in circulation by almost the middle of the first millennium CE. Exactly the time when Buddhism had a split. That is exactly the time when Puranas were written, right? So historians had to go through all these Puranic texts in order to understand what is the significance of these symbols, right? Yeah. Any questions till here? Oh, okay. So half lion and half man avatar is apparently called Narasimha avatar. Thank you, Yash, for that contribution. Cool. So if no further questions, we can move forward, right? Yeah. So Puranas, as we were talking about, they have been composed by first century, first millennium CE, and they have been in circulation for centuries. Like ever since then, even in the 21st century, we come across people who read Puranas, right? Like who have that Puranic knowledge, because that is like the huge source of information for us to about the various gods and goddesses we have in the Hindu religion. Again, a surprising interest, in fact, though, is the modern form of Hinduism. In the By the 21st century, we have almost 3.2 crore Hindu gods, right? Like 3.2 crore Hindu gods. That's a large number, guys. So that is how many gods we have in the present day Hindu religion, right? So what basically whatever was written as a part of Puranas, they were meant to be read by everybody, irrespective of their caste, irrespective of their gender. These Puranas were supposed to be read by everybody in the ancient times. But if you look at all the Vedas and all, which we've talked about in the second and third chapters, Vedas were not meant to be read by everybody. In fact, they were only read by the male people, and that too belonging only to the Brahmanical caste, right? But here Puranas are meant for everybody, right? They're very simple. Like, even though they were written in Sanskrit languages, they were written in Sanskrit verses, but the language used was very simple. It was not complicated Sanskrit. Like, if you have like basic knowledge of Sanskrit, you could read those Sanskrit verses and understand. And in case you're not that literate, you don't know how to read, there were all these organizations in place where learnt men used to read out what is written as a part of the Puranas to the illiterate people, right? So everybody knew what was written in the Puranas. And much of what is contained in the Puranas, like the basic content of the Puranas, it evolved over a period of time. And how did that happen? Because there was interaction happening between various kinds of people, right? From, be it anybody, be it priests, be it merchants, be it ordinary men and women, they started traveling from place to place, right? The main purpose for their travel was trade, but the fact that they are going to a different place and having conversations and interacting with a new set of people, while on one side trade was happening, simultaneously ideas, beliefs and practices were also being exchanged between people belonging to different regions of the Indian subcontinent, right? So when this was happening, as an example given to you earlier in the previous slide, I was talking about Krishna, right? Vasudeva Krishna. He was only an important figure in Mathura, but when, let's say, when Mathura people traveled to a next place, a different place, they carried with them the figures of Krishna, the ideas and beliefs of the Krishna and what they believed in. They spread this message to different people, and that is how the other people started believing in Krishna, right? So through the interactions, through the information of knowledge systems, the deities were also traveling through different places, right? And yes, over centuries, even though it took a lot of time, but eventually, after a lot of centuries, the worship spread to almost all the parts of the country, right? I hope this point is clear, guys. Any questions till this slide? Okay, so I do not see any questions here, which means we can move on, right? Yeah, so the next thing we'll be talking about is building temples, right? How were temples built and when were they built, and while the construction was happening, what is the kind of architecture that was adopted to build the temples, right? And how did that evolve over a period of time? So these are some of the questions we'll be dealing with in this sub-theme, right? It's called building temples. And just to give you a rough idea about when people actually started building temples, it was exactly the time when the stupas were being built, right? When Sanchi stupa was being built, let's say in 2nd 3rd century BCE, that is exactly the time when Hindus also started building temples for different gods and goddesses, right? So initially the structure of a temple was very simple. Like, when I mean very simple, it's just like one square room which was called as Garbhagriha, right? These are some technical terms relating to the structure of the temples, and it is important. It is really important. So please remember these names, guys, right? So it was just like one small square room where the statue used to be there, like the image used to be there of the god or the goddess, and people used to step inside through the one single gate it had. It only had one entrance. Unlike the Buddhist stupas, which had 4 entrances on all the sides, the initial temples, the Hindu temples, only had one entrance, single doorway, right? So whoever wants to worship they used to go through that one single doorway, offer his prayers or do some sort of rituals, and come back again through the same doorway, right? So this one important square room was called as Garbha Griha, right? The spelling is here, guys. Just have a look at the spelling. It's really important. It's Garbha Griha. And as the time passed by, as centuries were moving ahead, another structure was added to Garbhagriha. And where was it built? It was built over the central shrine. Garbhagriha is also called the central shrine, right? Let's say, for example, this is a Garbhagriha. Over it, like on top of the Garbhagriha, another tall structure called as Shikara was built, was added, right? And that is how the design of the temples was, or the structure of the temples was, till a certain period of time. And again, as time passed by, all these temples were decorated with sculptures. Like all the walls of these temples, sculptures came up, stories were being depicted on the walls, paintings were being done, and all that kinds of decoration, right? And as you move ahead of time, like a little later, these decorations became more elaborate, like with, like different structures were added. As I was telling you, walls had all these decorations. There were assembly halls within the temples. There were huge walls built as the boundaries of the temples. And now not just one gateway, but different gateways were added to in order to enter the temple, right? And it also had like arrangements for supplying water, because according to the Hindu traditions, you can't be dirty, like you can't be not sacred. In order to enter a temple, you're supposed to wash your hands and feet, right? So for that, obviously you need water. And there was a supply of water as well in the temples, right? So we'll just have a look at the figure, which gives you a detailed explanation of what a temple structure looked like, right? So this square hall, as I was talking about, is the Garbhagriha, or like the central shrine, right? And the Shikara is like this tall structure built above Garbhagriha, right? I'm sorry for the spelling, guys. It's Garbhagriha, Griha, right? So again, in your textbook, only Shikara, Garbhagriha are there. But if y'all ever want to learn about it in further details, just remember that there is a grid-like thingy called as Amalaka on the Shikara. And finally, there's a structure called Kalasa on the Amalaka, right? And mandapas are basically these halls, right? Function halls. Like if any grand rituals are happening, people used to sit in these function halls and look at whatever ritual is happening within Garbhagriha, right? So mandapa is basically the place where people assemble. And Ardha Mandapa is like a semi-function hall, like a half function hall, right? It was almost used for the same purpose. Like if there are more people, once the mandapa is filled, people used to sit in Ardha Mandapas, right? So I'm hoping everybody got a clear picture of what the structure of a temple looked like back in those times, right? Yeah. Any questions till here, guys? I'll just wait for a couple of seconds. If you all have any questions, please type them down in the chat box in the meanwhile. Okay. No questions, right? I hope everybody is understanding what's going through, because whatever we're discussing today is really, really important for the board examinations, guys, because these are like some of the important topics we want to cover when it comes to art or architecture or sculptures, right? Like the cultural developments, these are very important. So please pay attention. And yeah, so these were the structures of temples. But every temple did not follow the same method. Most of them did, but there were different types of structures also coming up, right? Different types of temples, and what are they, right? So if you look at a cave, let's say if you take a cave or like a huge rock, when I say huge, it's like the size of a building, like that is how huge the rock is, right? So people used to carve these rocks or carve the caves in order to build a temple, right? So what I mean by this is, let's see the difference. So in order for a normal temple to be constructed, you will gather stones or bricks or some kinds of cement or something from a different place, and you will assemble them one by one in order to construct a structure, right? But this is the opposite. The structure is already there. The rock or the cave is already there. You are giving it a shape by carving, right? So that is another form or another variety of temples that were coming up, right? So some of the earliest of these were constructed in the 3rd century BC, right? You find these cave like figures or huge rock like things constructed as early as 3rd century BC, during the time of Ashoka itself. In fact, Ashoka was the one who kind of sponsored and funded for these temples to be constructed, right? Majorly, they belong to the Ajivika sect. Ajivika sect people had these kind of temples, right? In order to refresh your memory, we've talked about Ajivika sect a couple of classes back, but I'll just tell you in brief what they are again, right? So please don't forget. So Ajivika sect are the people who basically believed that everything is predetermined, right? So what is that one important philosophy? Predeterminism. I'm sorry. Yeah, predeterminism. So that was the most important philosophy of Ajivika sect, right? Like whatever you do in real life, whatever caste you are, whatever religion you want to follow, whoever you want to believe in, whatever, how much ever good you want to do, how much ever evil you want to be, irrespective of what you're doing in the life, that doesn't matter, because even before you were born, your destination is predetermined, right? So that is one feature of Ajivika sect, right? So Ajivikas basically constructed these type of artificial cave like temples, right? Yeah. So one such figure or one such example you will come across where a total temple, like the totality of the temple, was carved out of a single stone, right? One great example of that kind of architecture is the Kailashnath temple. So this Kailashnath temple is a temple for Shiva. It's dedicated to Shiva, and you will find it in present day Maharashtra. If any of y'all have visited Ellora caves, which are in present day Maharashtra, that is exactly where the location of Kailashnath temple is, within the Ellora caves, right? So outside that temple, there's a copper plate inscription, and on the copper plate inscription, you will find a sentence uh, which is basically quote unquote, "Oh, how did I make it?" Right? So this is an exclamatory sentence made by the chief sculptor of the temple. Like he himself was amazed after looking at the sculpture. Like, did I do it? Like, if you look at the figure here, right? It is so elaborate. Like if you zoom in and look at the picture, like everything is so perfectly carved out of a single stone, right? So in order for that to happen, it will take like a lot of years, a lot of hard work, a lot of skill, right? So this chief sculptor himself was amazed, was surprised by looking at his work. Wow, I did a great job. That is what his reaction was after looking at the temple. If any of y'all will ever go to Ellora in the future, please have a look at this temple. It is worth visiting, because the kind of architecture or the kind of details engraved onto the walls is just amazing, guys. Right? Yeah. So, can we see everything? That is like the last sub theme of the chapter 4 of your textbook, right? So we'll be finishing the chapter with this sub theme, but let's just look at what it means, right? Can we see everything? So by now we looked at like n number of visual traditions, be it paintings, be it architectures, be it stupas, statues, whatever it is. We have looked at a variety of visual traditions, and right, we've also seen that some of them are destroyed either because of ravages of time, or people deliberately destroyed them, right? For example, when in the 12th century and 11th century the Muslim invasions were happening, the Muhammad of Ghor and Muhammad of Ghazni, they wantedly destroyed some temples, some Hindu temples. So either it's because of deliberate destruction, or either it's because it did not stand through the ravages of time. Whatever the situation is, we have lost some architectural work, right? So, but nevertheless, what remains, like whatever has been preserved, they convey a sense of the vision, right? So the vision of all these artists, the vision of these sculptors, the vision of architects, masons, like what was the intention behind to build these temples? Through a certain extent, through a certain limit, we will understand what the vision of these people were who created these spectacular works, right? So yet on the other side, do we always automatically understand what they wanted to convey, right? So the difference here is, if you look at the face value of a temple, fine, you will look at the architectural work, you will look at the fine engravings and all that stuff. But if you read another textual source or whatever, you can compare and relate whatever is written in the textbook to whatever you can see in front of you, right? But sometimes it's really difficult for us to understand what is the hidden meaning behind constructing such huge structures, right? Always it is not possible for us to decode such things. So if you look at them, we also have another question. Do we, or like, can we know what these images meant to people who saw them back like 2000 years ago, right? Like now we are in the 21st century, we are looking at something and we are like, okay fine, this means this, like X means this. But did they have the same meaning? Did they have the same value 2000 years back, or like when they were constructed initially, right? We don't know, because for everything we don't have evidences, for everything we don't have sources, right? So sometimes it becomes difficult, right? And we will look at such things in this slide, right? Grappling with the unfamiliar. We don't know what that is, and how do we go about it, right? So especially in the 19th century, when initially like people started looking into all these architectural works. Initially Indian scholars never were interested in this work. It was because of European scholars that this knowledge came up, right? The new field came up. So European scholars, when they looked at all these gods and goddesses in the initial 19th century, when they were first tackling with them, they had no clue as to what they were looking at. Like honestly, sometimes they were even horrified, right? Because you're looking at all these random weird figures, because like our Indian gods or our Indian deities, some of them have like multiple arms, right? Like I think it's Brahma who has like different sets of hands. And if you look at the another figure, they have like 10 heads, right? Or some, as Yash was telling, we have Narasimha avatar, like a statue which is half human and half animal, right? Like if you look at all these figures, initially, obviously, everybody would be surprised. And sometimes they were horrified, right? So that is the exact reaction of the European scholars also. They were not able to understand what is exactly the figure is trying to tell us, right? So what did they do? What did European scholars do then? In order to understand them, they started drawing comparisons with that of the Greek sculptures, right? The fact that they came from Europe means that they already were aware of the Greek architecture, right? So they used that method in understanding the Indian sculptures, right? Whether it is a plausible option or whether it is the right way to do is a different thing. We'll look at it in the next slide, but that is how European scholars started examining the Indian figures, right? And one thing which always European scholars thought of is that the Indian sculptures were inferior when compared to the work of Greek artists, because for some reason they thought that Greek artists were well versed in either painting or in either carving different sculptures, right? But they had like a different method. But if they looked at the Indian things, they looked at it as if it was something inferior to the works of Greek artists, right? But that is not all. That is not where it ended. They came across these really exciting figures of Buddha and Bodhisattvas, right? And they were very much interested in learning about them. Why? The reason being, these Buddhas or Bodhisattvas were based on Greek models. They, for some reason, represented or resembled Greek mode of architecture, like Greek styling of architecture, right? We will look at why that is so, because Buddha was inherent to India. Buddha was native to India. How did Buddha figures or Buddha statues, how were they made up of Greek styling of architecture, right? That is one important question we need to ask ourselves. And the answer to that is basically in this slide, where most of these stupas, or most of these, I'm sorry, not stupas, statues, most of these Bodhisattva statues and Buddha statues which had this Greek styling to them, they were found in cities like Taxila and Peshawar, which are basically in the northwestern frontier of the Indian subcontinent, right? In the present Pakistan, Afghanistan regions. In these regions only you will find figures with Greek styling. Why is it so? Because Indo-Greek rulers, they ruled for almost several centuries in the northwestern frontier, right? So obviously their influence will be there. Especially in the 2nd century BCE, Indo-Greek rulers had their peak time. Like they were dominating literally every aspect of life. Be it social life, be it economic life, be it cultural life, whatever it is, Indo-Greeks had their influence in every aspect of life, especially in the 2nd century BCE, right? So when figures were being made, when statues were being erected in the 2nd century BCE, whoever were styling these images, they gave a little bit of Greek styling to it, a Greek touch to these statues, right? So that is why in the 19th century, European scholars came across these figures which had a Greek styling, right? I hope this point is clear, guys, because obviously one will wonder why Greek styling to Indian figures, right? So this is the answer. And as these images were closest to the Greek statues, right, they had a Greek styling. So these scholars, these European scholars, they were already familiar with Greek architecture, and they considered that it is the best way to compare Indian art with Greek art and study about it, right? So what are they doing? Like, what is the effective strategy they are adopting here? Even now, if we don't know about anything, we will look at it from the lens of what we know, right? Reading or understanding the unfamiliar through the lens of the familiar. That is exactly what European scholars also did. Through the lens of Greek art, which is familiar to them, they are trying to understand something which is not familiar to them, which is the Indian art, right? I hope that point is clear as well. Yeah. So sometimes you will encounter scenarios where the textual evidences and the sculptures or the work of art you're seeing in front of you are not matching, right? We will consider one example, right, which is a rock surface in Mahabalipuram, right? So, but one thing we always talked about while discussing this chapter is that if you do not know what that sculpture is, if you do not know what that artwork is, go back to the textual sources, you will definitely find an answer there, right? But there are some scenarios where you can't, right? So one of the intriguing examples of this is the famous sculpture found in Mahabalipuram. Mahabalipuram is in present day Indian state of Tamil Nadu, right? So this is the figure, right? These are the sculptures on the walls. You have all these elephants here. You have a temple like structure here. And if you zoom in, you'll also come across various other elements of the image, right? So if you look at this wall on the Mahabalipuram rock surface, it's obviously trying to tell us some vivid story, some description of a story. But which story is it, is the question. And here is exactly where the art historians did a lot of research. They studied every Purana which is available, but still they couldn't come up with one single conclusion. There is a divide between the art historians as to what that story is, right? So we'll look at two such opinions. The first one is some feel, like some portion of the historians feel, that it depicts the descent of river Ganga, right? So if you look at the figure here, there is some sort of clutch here. So they are basically referring to this as the flow of Ganga, right? That is how the course of the river is. And it is the story basically telling us about how Ganga originated from heaven, right? This story is very much a part of Puranas and epics, guys. Whatever opinions we are talking about right now, they are from epics and Puranas. But people started associating this with different stories. So one opinion is the descent of the Ganga. The other opinion is a story from Mahabharata, right? Where Arjuna is basically doing penance on the banks of the river to acquire alms. This is a completely different story. Like it doesn't have any relation with Ganga. It has in fact to do with Mahabharata, where Arjuna is trying to like concentrating to meditate on the banks of a river because he wanted something from the god, from Indra, right? So these are some sorts of different opinions you will come up with when the textual sources and the artwork you see right in front of your eyes are not matching, right? So it's not always plausible that we come up with conclusions. Sometimes these are very vague and confusing, right? So final slide for the chapter, final slide of the first part of the textbook or today's class, let's say. So the thing is, finally, like what is the conclusion we can draw from this chapter, right? We have been dealing for almost 6 classes now with this chapter. What is the conclusion? So all the rituals, all the religious beliefs, and all the forms of practices, right, whatever we have seen is not everything. We've only read a part of it, right? Because sometimes some traditions or some portions of population, they do not see the need to account or to maintain records of what is happening, be it day-to-day events or be it special events or special festivals, whatever it is, they did not see the need to write it down. So we do not know about those kinds of populations, right? So what we know is just a very little. In fact, it's just the tip of the iceberg, right? So just because we've read a lot about the cultural developments happening in the 6th century BCE to 6th century CE, we should not come to a conclusion that we know about everything. There's a still lot of information which we do not know, right? Because people did not feel the necessity to write them down or like record them, right? So yeah, so that's the end of the chapter, guys. Again, any questions regarding the chapter, please put them down in the chat box. But like officially on paper, we have come to the conclusion of chapter 4, right? And which means we'll be having a quiz tomorrow on Monday at 6 p.m. in the evening on chapter 4 only, right? I'm hoping everybody will come prepared for the class, right? Any questions till here? We are at end of the chapter. Any questions throughout the chapter, please put them down in the chat box, or as the live ends, you can also ask in the comment section, for which I will reply to by the end of the day, right? Okay, so Sheba has a question regarding the class timings. No, Sheba, the timings are not changed. The timings still remain the same, which are Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 p.m. in the evening. But today's class was like a substitute class for which didn't happen on Friday, right? So day before yesterday, because of some issues, I couldn't take a class. So that is why I have rescheduled that one session to today at 11 a.m. But no, from tomorrow onwards, we'll be having classes at 6 p.m. only, right? Yeah. So any questions, please type them down. In the meanwhile, I'll try to wind this up, right? So about the pitch we've talked about in the beginning of the session. If any of y'all wants to ever subscribe to it, y'all can use my code TUM10 and get a 10% off straight away for any of the subscriptions you want to make, either to Iconic or Plus, right? And if you like the video, if you like the content of the video, please do like it. Please share it as much as possible and comment down below once the live ends. And also subscribe to the channel Unacademy and Scholars in particular, right? Yes, so thank you so much again, guys, for tuning in on a Sunday morning. I'm really sorry to take up an hour of your time on a weekend, but we are in a hurry to finish the syllabus, right? So we need to do it. Yeah. So that is it. I will see you guys again at 6 p.m. tomorrow. Reminding you again, there's a quiz tomorrow on chapter 4. So please come prepared. And as I promised in the last class, it's going to be only a Menti quiz full of MCQs and nothing else, right? Yeah. So there's still a half day of weekend remaining. I'm hoping everybody will enjoy your rest of the day, right? So have a good afternoon, have a good evening, right? I'll see you guys again tomorrow. Again, thank you so much, guys, for tuning in on a weekend. Thank you. Thank you so much.